The Force is strong with you. A powerful Sith you will become. Henceforth, you shall be known as Darth John C.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 3 of the Pseudo Nerd Podcast for January 22nd, 2016. I am your podcast host, Josh Kiser. Joining me today, Josh Haddix.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Why can't you just say hello normally?
Without laughing, jeez.
Well, God damn it.
And also, I wanted to welcome in and wish a happy 31st birthday to Kyle Hoagland.
Happy birthday,
31 and ready to mingle. Don't listen to this, honey.
Hold on. I gotta defend myself real quick. The reason I'm laughing is because, and it happens every week, but Hougie gave us the whole, and here we go. And it took like 5 seconds for us to go live. So
every single time. Yeah, so we can peel back the curtain here a little bit and let people know that when we do this recording, we use a program called Google Hangouts, and it lets us know when we're live or like when we're just talking to each other normally. And whenever he says go and he hits it, and then I sit here and I wait for it to go live. It takes like you said, like 5 or 6 seconds, and it's like by the time I'm starting to hold back laughter, but you know, I'm professional about it, unlike some other people on this podcast.
Hey, let technology catch up. We don't have flying cars yet, okay? You can wait a couple seconds for, Google Hangouts to make sure that everything's in sync.
We do have flying cars. They're called planes, okay? So,
Jesus
I
Christ.
don't even know what to say about that. But that said, this is episode 3 now, and we got some little housekeeping things to talk about. We are on iTunes. So Hougie put in for that, and I don't know if there's a strict approval process. I'm guessing no, given that we got
it is no one should know. If nobody knows, it is the strictest process ever. No, it's not too bad. You just submit the RSS feed and you wait a while. It takes anywhere between, it said 30 minutes to 2 weeks. Like, that is quite the range and of any kind of expectation, but not talking about 3 days.
I mean, that's basically
that's like how time exactly. I was gonna say that.
Gotcha.
I was gonna go with Time Warner, but you went generic, so I respect that. But Apple knew what they were dealing with when it came to us, so they jumped on board quickly. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate if you guys go out there and subscribe to us on iTunes. Leave us some feedback. Give us that 5-star rating. Write us a review. Let's get us jumping up on that list so other people can find us. And then also follow us on Twitter at Pseudo Nerd Pod. Follow us on Instagram now at Pseudo Nerd Pod. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. Pretty much we're gonna whore ourselves out on social media. So I appreciate somebody other than Shannon to follow us on all those media, if you will.
Yeah, shout out to Shannon. Super fan.
Our super fan.
Yep.
So we'll just get right into it this week. This is our 3rd week of the Star Wars topic, and this week is The Force Awakens. So this is going to be your final warning. If you have not watched Force Awakens, you should have already gone out there. We've told you now for 2 weeks to do that. You've been warned. We will spoil the shit out of the movie going forward here. Yeah. There is no holding back. We're not going to just talk in, cryptic things and kind of hint around at certain things. We are going to spoil all the major plot points. We're going to talk in depth, give our opinions on the movie, on the characters, and pretty much everything about it, and then kind of toss out some theories and ideas and what we think they might be going forward.
So just to be courteous then, just in case people don't have hearing comprehension on a podcast, we are going to have 3 seconds of silence right now to allow you to hit pause and then decide when you're ready to unpause after you've seen the movie. I appreciate that you guys actually did that without making fun of that.
That whole thing was ridiculous, and I
almost said, and believe it or not, that moment of silence was still shorter than the amount of time it takes for us to go live when Hougie record.
That is very true.
I would say if you can handle the time between going live, you can handle that.
Yeah. So
for all the viewers we just lost because of that, thanks, Hougie.
Shannon's still there.
Are they viewers? Or are they listeners? How do you
listeners, viewers? You know? Well, I mean, they're looking at something when they listen, right? So
they might well, yeah, but they're not looking at us, or maybe they are. I don't know.
Maybe.
What they're not looking at is George Lucas's direction of Episode 7, because guess what?
We are off to a stellar start here, fellas.
Hey. You guys can't ruin the segues. Somebody's got to bring it home.
Well,
that's what I'm doing.
That's the first time I had to fucking throw my headset down for a second. I wasn't ready for that.
So George Lucas sells the franchise to Disney back in 2012, I believe, for the lump sum of $4 billion.
It's a cool. I don't know what I'm saying. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Just this stellar start has literally just kept on rolling.
Dude, your segues just fucking stupefy me. I can't even talk. Well, let me know when you say my name again so I can say bye.
Yeah, that's about where we're at this point. So Lucas sells it to him and was going to stay on as a creative consultant. And they basically, at the time that they sell it, Disney announces that they're going to, in fact, make episodes 7, 8, and 9. Originally, they asked for Lucas to turn over his ideas of what he originally, what he had thought the episodes would be about. And Lucas pretty much later stated Disney discarded those stories. So, it's kind of funny, but it goes to show you just the tone of this movie as we'll get into it. You can tell it's not a Lucas movie, but it is a Lucas movie. And that I may be kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth right now when I say that, but it's different. You can tell the direction they're heading is not the direction Lucas would have taken it.
Agreed.
So, I don't know about you guys, but the hype for this movie was through the roof. When you finally saw that first trailer and you just all the readings going into it, I mean, this was going to be something special. And one of the biggest reasons why is these were the sequels to 4, 5, and 6, and they were bringing back Luke Skywalker, Leia, Han Solo, Chewbacca, C-3PO, R2-D2, the characters that you loved were coming back for this one, and that just adds a lot of excitement to, see where your beloved characters from 30 years ago, where they're at now.
And Boba Fett was still eating on Tatooine.
Yeah. But I will give them credit that, and we'll get into the Who's later, but they didn't overwhelm you with the original characters. I think they did a good job at making you fall in love with these new characters while giving you kind of a taste of the original characters that you loved, Yeah,
and that's a great point. Yeah, because they want they basically want to transition into this new era of Star Wars with the new characters. And it was like they sort of wanted to bridge that gap, but like you said, you didn't want this to be, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford over and over again. You want these new actors to be in there and sort of shine and, filter in accordingly with the other ones.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest ways they did that, and to your point, actually, so the main gist of this story is, I believe even the subtitle for The Force Awakens, it opens up with basically they're searching for Luke Skywalker. He has gone missing. You don't know why, at the beginning. You just know he's sort of not there. And one of the original writers for the screenplay kept saying the movie had Luke appearing early to midway through the movie, and during every rendition, they just realized like Luke was taking over the script, and they didn't want that because it was, to your point, Haddix, was going to kill any of that draw or interest in these new characters. So they eventually wrote it out to you don't see Luke Skywalker till the last minute of the movie.
Yeah, and he doesn't say anything. So
no, which drives you nuts in some ways.
Yeah.
But we'll get down that road later into the podcast here. So I think what Abrams was trying to do with this movie, and if you guys disagree, let me know, but I think the idea was the prequels were they didn't feel like a Star Wars movie. In each of them, there was
very
something
subpar.
Yeah, and then just the whole tone of it, where we watched the trailer for this one, and it was like, just in the trailer, you're like, oh my gosh, this is Star Wars. They just visually, you looked at it, it felt like a Star Wars. It wasn't overly CGI'd. It felt natural. You heard the music, and you could just see it, and you could tell that Abrams was trying to basically dial things down from where the prequels were and bring it back to that feeling you saw and you got when you watched the original trilogy.
Yeah, and I have a good example of that, and tell me if you guys agree. The lightsaber battles, and I read this going into the last podcast, and it never got brought up, but the lightsaber battles in the originals were very, partially because of the technology, but the battles themselves were very, anticlimactic as far as the actual battle goes, but there was a lot of emotion involved, which made them cool. And then you go to the prequels, and the battles were insane, like the acrobatics involved.
Yeah, it was much more action packed.
But there was a lot less emotion in those. You were almost just kind of taken over by like Yoda bouncing around off of walls, which was cool in its own regard. But then you go to the Force Awakens, and I feel like they kind of met right in the middle. The battles weren't insane. No one was flipping around doing flips anywhere, but there was some heavy emotions in this, especially in a few scenes, which we'll get into later. But the emotions were very, very heavy, and you could almost, you were rooting for the good guy, rooting against the bad guy, however you want to say it. You know what I mean? While watching these fights, and it was very, very entertaining.
Yeah, I agree with your sentiment there. And I think because at this point in the story, there's no trained Jedi, there's no trained Sith at this, other than Kylo Ren, who was trained briefly. You're not sure how long Luke trained him early on, and then failed him in one regard or another. So they don't have this extensive background with lightsabers, with any of the with the Force, any of that. So the battles, in a sense, you would imagine would have to be a much scaled down, because they're not going to flip around. They're not going to have that Jedi-like reflexes because they're not sure about their talents. They're not sure about their skills at this point. So
it was just like the first time Luke fought Vader, he wasn't flipping around or doing anything acrobatic the first time he even fought, and he was very, very early in his training.
Right. So that's a good parallel back to the original one, and we'll talk about that right now. There's a lot of parallels to the original trilogy to this one, and in some regards, I think it was like I said, a way for them to get back to what people loved about the Star Wars movies, but there's also some downside to the way they went about it. I guess there's a lot of cliche maybe, or it's almost downright.
It's fanfare instead of originality.
It lacks originality. That's a great way of putting it, because a lot of it is rehashed from the original trilogy. At times, almost too much. And one thing we can talk about right now, and we're going to kind of bounce all over the place with this, is the Star Killer base, which, first of all, Star Killer, nice little Easter egg shout out to what George was originally calling Luke Skywalker's last name. Instead of Skywalker, it was supposed to be Star Killer. So that was a nice little Easter egg there. But they decide for now the third time, we need a planet destroyer, but let's just make this one bigger than the last one, and then make sure there's just a vulnerability that can destroy the whole thing.
Yeah. To me, you have to have, and I don't know the answer to this, and the answer to it in the prequels was horrible, with the whole Trade Federation and all that shit. You have to have this greater evil that can impose this fear on everybody, not just our heroes or whatever. So I understand that, and I understand that that's hard to do, but I feel the third time is ridiculous. It was a cool thing. It was cool how they did it, but
yes, it almost made it more realistic than the Death Star in that they have this planet now, so it's bigger. They build it out of the planet, and it sucks energy out of a star and converts it into this beam. So from a physics or realistic standpoint, it makes more sense than this Death Star that can just do that. So okay, cool. But then, what's the downside? Oh, well, if you just hit this spot here, it could cause the planet to basically get out of whack and destroy itself. So very common to just shoot it here and it's going to destroy it, Now, I will say, in some regard, I feel like Harrison Ford, when in that scene, when they're talking about the Star Killer base, he's like, oh, so it's another Death Star. And they're like, well, no, it's bigger. And he's like, so it's a bigger Death Star. And he's like, how do we destroy it? There's always a weakness. He was almost kind of pandering, I think, to the audience in that and maybe it's just me, but I felt that he almost felt annoyed with the situation and was like, we're doing this again? All right, here it is. There's got to be a way to do it. They didn't learn the last two times, and apparently we're just going to run with this again. And I don't know if that was just how I interpreted it.
I felt like the moment he was talking about that, I thought he was going to pull a Deadpool and look at the audience and just roll his eyes. So how do we kill this one? So no, I definitely felt the same way. It's almost like he was saying what I think a lot of us were thinking.
So why don't we just talk about Han right now, since we're there? We just mentioned him. Obviously, they're bringing back the original cast. Leia's in it very briefly, here and there scenes. Luke, like we said, is only in it at the end. Han is really the character from the original trilogy that sort of makes his presence known in this. Well, and that too. How did you guys feel about his involvement and how they sort of wrote him into the script?
Go ahead, Hoagland. I'll let you take this one, unless you want to.
No, I think it was the right amount. I feel that, once again, it's fanfare. I think also a lot of us, or people that are big fans of this whole series saga, know that I think Harrison Ford would have been fine if he never was in a Star Wars movie again. I think he took advantage of the fact that I think he knew that this was going to be, I wouldn't say different, but at least would give him the opportunity to actually have his farewell. Spoiler, he does die. But I think it was the right amount. He played a supporting role. Harrison Ford is one of those guys where he doesn't play Han Solo. He plays himself as Han Solo. So it's not like he's got to he's not like where an actor has to change his mannerisms. Everything that Harrison Ford pretty much has ever been as far as like a leading role, whether it's Indiana Jones or Han Solo or even a couple other like smaller roles he's been in, he's always had kind of like the same sarcastic, somewhat hotshot mannerisms. So this wasn't going to be a difficult thing for him to do and to reprise. So to me, he wasn't a main guy, but he was important enough that he definitely earned. He needed to be there, obviously, in order to further other character development like Kylo Ren.
Right, and I agree. He definitely had a good, like we talked about this on the original trilogy podcast, that he wanted killed off. He didn't want to be in. He wasn't originally signed up for the sequels. He had no desire. He was sort of doing other things at that point, and he wanted out of that as quickly as possible, and they kept him in. So I think in many ways it was his send off at this point. I mean, he was ready to go, and this also helps catapult to the further stories without him having to take up any more time, take any more screen time up from these new characters. And I think it pulled in the old nostalgia, but then also was a nice sort of transition to the new age of people. And his send off was, I think, his death scene, which we'll get more into shortly, was good for what it was supposed to be. And about the only thing I didn't like was, and this could be the writing, this could be how they wrote it into, and it could be just Carrie Fisher, but the whole him and Leia situation, with the plot the way it is they have a kid who's, spoiler, Kylo Ren, and Kylo Ren goes bad, and they sort of split up and kind of do their own thing. Leia continues running these rebellions, or now the Resistance, and he goes off smuggling and things like that, doing what he did before, him and Chewie having their antics. And they reunite, and I don't know, the whole thing, it just felt real, I don't know if awkward's the right word, but I don't know how you felt about that, Haddix.
I think, and it just reflects off of the original trilogy. And this is like no shot at her, but I don't think Carrie Fisher is a great actress. And I think it showed multiple times throughout the movie. And maybe, a couple of the scenes were the writing. Maybe, they just didn't write it in there. Or maybe it was written like that because they knew that she wouldn't be able to deliver. I mean, when he dies, she doesn't even really cry. This is supposed to be, the love of her life and the father of her child, and she didn't even cry. I mean, she got like teary-eyed.
For what it's worth, they do show that scene where she sort of like stumbles and falls down kind of thing when he gets killed, which is nice because it's something that you've seen in the past when a loved one or something crucial happens, that somebody who has like that power of the Force like can really feel it. Yeah. So they do show that, but yeah, you're right. She doesn't really do anything. Honestly, Chewbacca, it almost pulls at your heartstrings more.
Dude, that scene was probably one of the best scenes in the movie, to be honest with you. I mean, that was one of my favorite scenes.
The funny thing is, it could have been better. It could have even been a much better scene. And like I said, we'll talk about that when we talk about Kylo.
Yeah, and we'll get to Kylo. We'll talk about the new characters now, but we'll hold Kylo off for a minute and refer to the sort of the two main protagonists. We've got Rey, who is this girl. She's on this desert planet of Jakku. She's a scavenger of some sort. You could tell she was abandoned by family in one aspect or another, and she keeps waiting for him to come back. She's pretty much living day to day, just trying to get by with scraps, and sort of gets thrown into all this.
So basically, the same origin story of basically the other two protagonists in these movies.
Are you talking?
Luke Skywalker and Anakin Skywalker.
Okay, that's where I didn't know if you meant those are the two characters you meant. So I just want to make sure that you were talking about.
Yeah.
This particular movie.
The first time I saw her and saw that was her occupation, and she was on a desert planet and was basically a junker. Like, well, this sounds eerily familiar.
Right. And again, this is going back to the parallels to the originals, and actually a little bit of parallel to the prequel in that regard too. So she obviously has some sort of history. You don't know what it is. You don't know why she's there. You don't know who her family is. And as the movie goes on, you find out that she has the Force in her. She is powerful. When Kylo Ren tries to read her mind, she blocks it. So you can tell that that there's more to her than meets the eye. Like a transformer, if you will.
God.
Jedi's in disguise.
Oh, we don't know if she's going to be a Jedi yet.
So, and we'll get into our theories on her shortly, but I just want to kind of set the table with her, and then set the table with Finn here, who's the other main protagonist. He's a stormtrooper that went out on his first battle and basically failed miserably. He sees a little bit of blood, sees a guy die, and freaks out and decides that this stormtrooper life is not the life for him. And pretty much that's where we go off with him.
That sounds like a Broadway musical song.
What does?
Just like the life of a stormtrooper is not the life for him.
Oh, nice. All right. Well, yeah, okay. So the thing I want to point out about these two characters is Rey is a female, and Finn is a black guy.
African American.
You could have said black man.
I could have.
Black guy.
Well, fair enough. All right, whatever.
I'm just busting your balls.
So I point this out because I'm curious to see your guys' input. In the original trilogy, there was two females. There was Leia, and then there was the Mon Mothra, or whatever the hell her name is, who talks about how the Bothans died to get the Death Star plans. Other than that, there are no females in the Star Wars, in the original trilogy. As far as black men, there are a very small handful. Most of them are background characters, and then there's Lando.
I'll say Lando, yeah.
Lando might be the only one with speaking lines. And now, in defense, James Earl Jones is the voice of Darth Vader, but he's not on screen, obviously. And then you go to the prequels, and you have Mace Windu, who's the black man of this thing. And then, yes, there are a couple other minor characters, a few more than the original trilogy had. And then the females, you have Amidala, sort of her group of, like, clone girls who, like, follow her around and sort of
so just get blown up and killed for her.
Basically, right, her minions. And then a couple other female characters there. But in all reality, like, it's one main female in both of those and one main black man in both of those. And when I say main, they're like side characters. They're not main characters. So do you think that having the two main characters in this being a black man and a female is Star Wars or maybe even Disney's influence on them, but their way of like sort of trying to apologize for anything in the past that maybe there was some racism to a degree, or even just a very misogynistic approach? Or do you think I'm just way off base here?
You're not going to please everybody, because even when they decided that they were going to that Boyega was going to be in the movie, I mean, there was so much Twitter backlash about knowing that there was going to be an African American that was going to be in a leading role. At least is what we were assuming at the time, that he was going to be in a leading role. It was in a ton of the trailers.
I think part of that though is the backlash is because he's wearing a stormtrooper outfit. People were assuming that it was destroying the whole clone idea, which
they
really
debunked pretty early in the movie.
Yes. Right, they did. And to be fair, there was talks that even in the original trilogy, they weren't clones anymore at that point. So But I think that was part of that.
But I mean, they had the whole boycott episode 7 just because of him.
That's crazy.
I know it is crazy. I honestly don't care who portrays who as long as they do the job right. I think that Disney is. I don't know if it's so much of an apology as much as just saying, hey, it's 2016. You know, as much as maybe the inner circle might still be mostly predominated by, you know, the white male for most lead roles. I think if they're going to take the advantage and introduce, you know, a female lead and an African American male lead, you might as well. This is Disney's first go at making these, or, you know, being behind these films. They're all about diversity, so to them, it's being able to, I guess, please that crowd, because you know that if it was going to be 2 white males again, you know there was going to be a group out there that's going to yell and scream about, oh, here we go, episode 7 of fucking racist Star Wars.
Right, and I'm not saying I'm not saying Disney did that and in complete defense, I think the 2 actors did fantastic in those roles, and I like their characters, and I think they're great. So maybe they were just the best for the role, but I don't know if they were looking for that when they went out and cast it or not.
Oh, I'm sure there was research groups and stuff like that probably mentioned it. I'm not saying that they didn't when they first started writing it. It just happened to be, let's do a female and do a male, and then it got looked at. But I have reason to believe that I would assume that before they decided to do casting and really, you know, create people or have, you know, real people playing these roles, that they definitely took the approach of being a little more diversified because they had the opportunity to do so. It's a new story. It's a new arc. This is the time to do it. It's not a time to do it in episodes 8 or 9.
Right. And so, okay, and we'll get more into their stories later. I just want to kind of bounce through all the characters real quick. The other new character that kind of got introduced was Poe, this great star pilot sort of guy. He's kind of cocky, sort of arrogant, charismatic. Haddix, what is your feeling on him?
I mean, I think he's our new trilogy Han Solo, or at least they're trying to portray him as that. Obviously,
are they trying too hard for that?
I mean, it wasn't anything I walked out of the movie saying like why I didn't like him because they forced him down our throat or anything. But I think once you leave the movie, especially when you find out Han dies, so he will not be in any of the other movies. I guess we could assume that. I guess you never know with Star Wars, but
right. I think it's safe to say he's not coming back.
Yeah. So I think, you know, they kind of want to give you that hero that's kind of in the air flying around. So it's not, you know, during those scenes, they concentrate on him more than anybody. You know, everyone else is kind of side characters. So
sure,
you kind of want that guy.
Somebody up there, right?
Yeah, you want that guy up there. So when you're in those scenes, like when they're, you know, trying to blow up the force field or whatever on the Star Killer, you know, I mean, he's the one leading the pack. He's the one that you're watching, you know, rooting for and all that. So yeah, maybe they tried to, you know, push him a little bit too much, but
yeah, I agree. And I think by the end of the movie, I was content. And to your point, like I think that you do need that because Star Wars they're going to have the battles on land, whether it's blasters or sabers or something to that effect. But there is going to be battles with, you know, ships and in the sky, and they need that. So you need somebody to be the face of that. Yeah. And I agree completely with your assessment there. I think what bothered me was right at the beginning, that first part where he's looking at Kylo Ren and he's like, so, you know, who speaks first? Do I speak? Do you speak? And he was like, it was almost like they were trying to like at first I'm like, oh God, are they going to force it too much to make him like, hey guys, he's our new Han Solo.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think they dial it down through the rest of the movie, but at first it was like, okay, like, let's take it easy here, guys.
Does anybody not notice, and I can't believe that we didn't think about this, but, okay, so his last name is Poe, right? And
that's his first name.
Oh, it's his first name?
It's like
Derek or
Poe Derek, Poe Daniels, or something like that.
Okay, well, even so, I mean, you got a guy named Poe. He is an excellent star fighter, and there was a guy in the original trilogy who was a starfighter, and his last name was Porkins.
It's Poe Dameron, for what it's worth.
Dameron, there we go. For what it's worth, on the Porkins thing, I'm glad you brought that up because we really need to discuss.
We should bring up Porkins in probably every podcast, even if it's not Star Wars.
There's
also, a new drinking game for this episode. Every time you say "for what it's worth."
There is a scene at the end with the where Poe's leading the charge in the ships. There is another Porkins. There's a fat guy with a beard flying in there, and I'm pretty sure Porkins has a son, maybe a grandson.
His name is Snap Wexley in the movie.
In my vision of the Star Wars universe, Porkins was out there porking like crazy, and he's probably has his offspring throughout the entire galaxy, and one of them decided to follow in his heroic father's shoes and lead the charge on the Starkiller base.
Unlike his father, though, he survived at least Episode 7.
Did he survive, though?
I'm pretty sure he was flying away at the end.
Was he there? Okay, maybe.
I thought so.
Any of you listeners out there who are going to go out and watch the movie again, keep an eye out on Porkins Jr. and let us know where he's at.
Shannon, double check real quick. Go see the movie real quick and let us know.
So the main villain of this, well, two main villains. The first is Kylo Ren, who obviously during the trailers you see this guy. He's wearing the dark clothing, the helmet reminiscent of Darth Vader. Something you didn't see it in the originals or the prequels. So it's sort of a nice throwback to Vader, and there's a part where he says, "I'll finish what you started" in the trailer, and you see he's got Vader's helmet. So you're very curious on this guy. Comes into the movie. Right at the beginning, Poe shoots a blaster at him, and he uses the Force to just hold the blaster laser.
That was badass.
In midair, which was very cool. Yeah. So you're like, oh shit, this guy's got some real talent with the Force. And turns out, you find out he is the son of Han Solo and Leia. He was trained by Luke for a period of time, turned on Luke, which is what caused Luke to run away and hide and try to find the Jedi Temple.
You made him sound like such a bitch.
Well,
pulled a Yoda.
Maybe he is. He did kind of pull a Yoda. Maybe he went to go take a long nap. You never know.
Hey, rip Yoda.
So he kind of comes in here, and then you find out the parallel to the original trilogy was it's Luke's battle against the dark side. Luke wants to be on the light side with the good, and he's battling this fight against the dark side. Where here it's the reverse, where Kylo Ren has the dark side, wants to be the dark side, has this misguided idea of what Darth Vader was trying to do, and is trying to battle the light side. In his quest of just basically taking over the galaxy and ruling with the dark side. So I know, Hougie, you really wanted to talk on Kylo Ren, so I'm going to just throw it over to you.
First of all, what did nobody tell him that Darth Vader was Anakin Skywalker and that he redeemed himself and turned away the dark side and ended up, redeeming and bringing balance to the Force? Because what got me really confused when he's talking to the helmet and is telling me like, "Oh, what do I need to do?" And I'm like, dude, that guy stopped being Darth Vader at the end. Like, what makes you think that guy wanted to do that anymore when the guy that was training you was his son? Should have probably told you that story. You have, the other, your mother is the other daughter, and the other person and is married to the guy who was a part of the whole story to begin with. I feel like, how is he so disillusioned with who Vader
it's bad parenting and bad teaching on Luke's part. He went to the Jedi school of teaching that Mace Windu and Yoda went to, where they just butchered everything. And I think he just totally forgot that lesson of, he probably opened up with, here's how Darth Vader became Darth Vader, and here's how he got the powers of the dark side and forgot the whole lesson on, oh, by the way, he went to the found the light, turned back.
That's quite the page missing. And so Kylo, he's being trained by Luke. Obviously, Luke's never taken on an apprentice before. He's about as green. He's more green than Obi-Wan. Well, no, his lightsaber was. Well, no, I mean it was blue. That was what Anakin's was. But yeah, he ended up creating his own that was green. Yes, you're right. He gets trained by Luke Skywalker, who is about. We shat on You did anyways. Obi-Wan, who took on Anakin, took on his first apprentice, and you would think Obi-Wan was even more ready to take on apprentice than Luke Skywalker would be, just because, yes, he understands the knowledge of the Force, but he doesn't know how to teach that to somebody. Like, yeah, I understand he has a great master, but he's not surrounded by people that are going to mentor him anymore. He's basically by himself. He's alone. He's the only Jedi there. So he's going to try and restore the Jedi Order and takes Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, to try and teach him. He's basically just learning the shit on the fly while teaching him, and surprisingly, something bad happens.
It screws up.
Which is the same thing that happened with Yoda. One of the reasons why Yoda went into exile was because he blames the fact that he should have seen Darth Sidious from the beginning. He had the chance to stop it. They never were able to, and I believe they kind of went into exile. Wanted to go into hiding because they knew that they would be hunted, and two, I think that there's a little bit of like a pity party. I think Yoda probably also did. He's like, you know what, I messed up too much. I need to get out of the way. It's not time for me to help yet. So I'm hoping that that's what's going to happen with Luke, where Luke is going to have a redeeming moment and hopefully tries to set things right.
You imagine that's what's going to go forward, and that's probably going to be a main focus of Episode 8. The other villain in this movie now is who you imagine is the equivalent of like the Emperor in the other movies, and that's Snoke. You see nothing more than a hologram of him a couple of times, and the first time you see him, you think this guy's like 30 feet tall, disfigured sort of alien-like creature, and then you see it's a hologram, so you're really not sure how tall he is or isn't. You could tell he's been Kylo Ren's teacher now. He must have some powers. Whether he's a Sith or not, we're still not sure. You really don't know much about him. You know that like Han and Leia make note of him, so he is known in the universe, but just how much at this point we don't know. Haddix, what was your initial thoughts of Snoke?
Well, I mean, like you said, when you first see him and you think he's this giant, I think my first thought that went through my head was, I didn't know there was giants in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
Like, this is nuts. It's in this huge, gigantic room, so, he fits and all that. And then when you find out it's a hologram, you're like, oh, okay. But I liked it. I liked the fact that it was kind of like what Marvel is doing or did, with this supreme bad guy there's kind of a main bad guy in the movie, which is Kylo Ren, or, the Admiral, or whoever the guy is that is in charge of the Star Killer, that one jabroni. There's like kind of this overlying bad guy that you don't, even by the end of the movie, you don't really know who he is. I mean, you know his name, you know that he trained Kylo Ren, he mentions the Knights of Ren. And then towards as a matter of fact, I think his last line is, bring Kylo Ren to me, to finish his training or whatever.
Right, correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, he's this vague character. You know that he's some ultimate badass because he's basically telling Kylo Ren what to do, and he's telling this other dude what to do, kind of controlling everything. So it kind of just leaves you out there. I mean, and I'm sure like you guys and like anyone else who's seen the movie has read all kinds of spoilers on who they think he is or what they think he's going to do, and just no one knows. It's a good bad guy to have.
Kyle, I know you wanted to add to the Snoke discussion, so feel free.
Well, it's Snoke. I want people need to also make sure that they're not mistaking, a Force sensitive person that prefers the dark side over a Sith Lord. Because there is a difference, it's just like somebody who has the light side of the Force, like Rey, who's not a Jedi. So obviously we don't know. Snoke is very mysterious and powerful, kind of like the Continuum Transfunctioner. And no, nothing? Cool. So, so to me, Snoke, obviously we're going to learn more about Snoke when it comes to it, but I just don't want people. I've heard a lot of people talk about, he must be the new Sith Lord. I'm like, we don't know if he's even a Sith, because as far as we're concerned, the rule of two states, there can only be two. Both of them died 30 years ago, so there was no one there to have an apprentice, have the apprentice kill the master, or whatever the case, whatever the rules are.
Right.
So as far as I'm concerned, the Sith Order is dead. So this is kind of more of the battle of the light side of the Force and the dark side of the Force. There's really no more Jedi versus Sith or the Empire versus the Republic. It's every three-parter seems to have a different parallel as far as who's the good and bad side.
Which, by the way, bringing that up, so you've got in this one the First Order versus the Resistance. And what bothers me is this movie takes place basically 30 years after Return of the Jedi. The First Order has a planet that can destroy planets. They've got a huge, massive, massive army of troopers that they've basically been developing since birth. It looks like they take people away from their families. That's sort of the story you get from Finn, is he was taken from his family and created, they're not using clones anymore. They're using these, kidnapped people that they force training on. And they've got all these starships and this and that. And you got the Resistance, who's not the Republic, the Resistance sort of the side group.
The Republic does exist, though. It's the Resistance is being backed by the Republic.
Well, but what I don't understand is how does just Luke fucking up with Kylo Ren cause this First Order to rise out of nowhere? Were they rising to power when the Emperor was there, or did they just kind of come out of clue? And how do they get the funding for all of this? It's just a very convenient way of having this massive evil organization that just seems to do what they want. And they nobody saw them, was able to stop them. How did the Republic and the Rebellion originate? Why didn't they do anything to help stop this?
Well, apparently Snoke got a hold of the Emperor's checkbook after he died, because that doesn't. It's there's no answer. I mean, this is all speculative.
Right. And now maybe they will answer. Maybe, like you said, maybe Snoke turns out he comes out of nowhere during that 30-year hiatus we're not sure about, and he rises to power and helps, create these things and help, organize the First Order. So maybe there's more to it that we're going to find out later. But right now it's just man, really,
Well, I mean, also it's either having a lot of money or a lot of power. So, I mean, obviously when they defeated the Empire, there's still plenty of troops. They didn't kill everybody. I mean, they got millions and millions of, subordinates and troops and, people, they just killed the really important guys and then whoever was on the second Death Star. So,
well, shame on the Rebellion for not capitalizing after they destroyed the Emperor and the second Death Star.
Shame, shame, shame.
So, one other character that I just want to bring up right now. Hougie, this is going to fall into the levels of the Boba Fett.
Oh, Captain Fabulous?
Captain Phasma. It was the stormtrooper, the chrome stormtrooper that you saw in the previews that everyone's like, oh my god, who is this badass going to be? We know it's played by the chick who's from Game of Thrones, so it's a pretty big actress right now.
If that's not vague for anybody, the chick from Game of Thrones,
the big chick from Game of Thrones,
Brie of Tarth from Game of Thrones.
There you go. And she's a Boba Fett of this. She does nothing. She does less than Boba Fett does.
So I particularly looked this up going into this podcast because you and I talked about this after we saw it the second time, Kiser.
Right.
So I looked her up and wanted to find out, what happened. I think I literally Googled, did Captain Phasma die? And the best quote that I could get was, I think, is Kennedy the director of the next one?
Kennedy?
Yeah.
Kennedy.
Something Kennedy.
Kathleen Kennedy. She's
For
not
the story,
she's
the
like
writer?
she's like a producer, so
Okay.
she's overseeing it all.
So here's the quote, and this is a little toss back to our boy Boba. The quote is, "But you won't see Phasma tapping out after being carelessly knocked into a Sarlacc pit like a wobbly toddler. Kennedy has big plans for Phasma and confirmed that the captain will carry on into the next movie. She's an important character, a baddie in the best sense of the word." So hopefully she redeems herself.
Yeah.
In episode 8 and 9.
See, at first I thought she blew up on the planet, and if that was the case, I'm like, that's just sad.
Well, they don't show her, so.
No. Han made that comment about, do you have a trash compactor, yada, yada. So no one really knows what happens, but I'm sure if she comes back in the 8th one, I'm sure she'll make a comment about it, like, oh, I was here or something like that, you know what I mean?
Right.
So.
And I think she will show back up, at least at this point, because they haven't shown anything. In reference to that trash compactor, there are a lot of Easter eggs in this. For instance, Finn pulls that ball when he's in the Millennium Falcon. He pulls that ball out that Luke used for when he's first testing his Force talents. They have the chessboard and little things like that. Actually, Finn's number is the same cell number that Leia was in in New Hope. So there's little throwbacks like that, but he's making a joke there, and there's a lot of comedy in this one, especially like Chewbacca's a big part of the comic relief. Did you guys feel that there was too much comedy in this movie in comparison to how the other movies were, or did you enjoy all the comedy?
No, it was fine because this one actually had good acting. So one of the reasons why you kind of had some, I guess I would say, awkward comedy, especially in the prequels, I think it was because there was not enough good quality drama in the first 3 that felt real. So to have a little bit of like human emotion, whether it's either on the depressing or dramatic side or to the funny side. No, I didn't think it was too funny. I think it was appropriate where it needed to be. That was one of those where it was a good yin and yang of funny to drama. Whereas I feel like on the first 3, or the prequels, where it was serious, it was awkward. When it was funny, it was corny.
Okay, yeah, that's fair, and I didn't mind it. I know that's been some of the complaints I've seen online is people thought there was too much comedy in it. I thought it was well done for the most part. Maybe a line here or there that was kind of unnecessary. Like the one part I'm thinking of is when they're on the planet and they're trying to. He's like, "Wait, you work sanitation, so how do you know how to take the defenses down?" And he said, "I don't." And Harrison Ford's like, "You don't." And then Chewbacca says something, and he looks at him and goes, "Oh, you're cold." Like that part didn't need to be in there, but it was another comedy line they added. So like it's nitpicking, I know, but I'm just saying like they could have cut a few parts out where it just seemed it was an unnecessary comedy line to throw in at that moment, but it was whatever. People laugh. It is what it is. Is there anything that you really disliked in this movie that we haven't discussed yet? Haddix, I'll start with you.
I don't think there's anything that I really, really didn't like. I think the only thing that, might raise an eyebrow is too many parallels to the originals, which I think if we go into episode 8 and they kind of pull that back, I think it'll be okay. I think it's okay if the first movie after all these years kind of gives us a little bit of that, as long as it's not something that carries through every movie. Like if it happens the same amount in episode 8, I think it'll really start to piss people off.
Yeah, I agree.
But if it kind of takes its own route from here on out, I think people will enjoy it. So, I mean, it's not really a dislike. It's just something that I'm
It's like you're kind of keeping a close eye on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and it could be a bigger gripe going forward.
Yes.
How about you, Hougie?
So my fascination on the villains, it goes back to Kylo. I mentioned before in the podcast about Dooku and how I really enjoyed him because he's a person. But you see like a true emotion, the methodicalness of Dooku, and Kylo. To me, it's a really good struggle for him. Of him trying to, he wants to be on the dark side, but he's got, the light side in him that's trying to pull him back. But my biggest concern, my biggest complaint about this whole movie, and I just talked about this with you before we started this, Kiser, was the scenes where he took his helmet off. He didn't need to have his helmet off. He already had that scene where he's staring at Vader's helmet, and he's almost like talking to an idol. And just asking for help and like, what do I need to do to like get this this weight off my shoulders so I can, fulfill what I feel is my destiny. And then it goes to when Rey asks him to take off his helmet, which I guess I feel like kind of just shows his weakness, like or manipulation, where he felt like he had to take off the helmet. He didn't need to. He's a fucking badass. He doesn't need to take orders from anybody, let alone, this woman that he just, kidnapped and is trying to interrogate as a prisoner. But the big scene that could have been an even bigger scene was when Han Solo is calling out Kylo Ren, and he tells him to take off his helmet, and he does. If that was the first time we ever saw Ben Solo, was at that point, that was the first time you saw, what's his name? David Driver? What's the name of Adam Driver? If that was the first time we ever saw his face, I think that would have just created so much more drama, and that was already like the biggest.
That's the emotional climax right there.
Yeah, and that could have been like a gigantic explosion of a climax.
Right.
If they would have waited to finally
that could have been the star killers of climaxes.
Exactly. This could have been the money shot of all money shots.
Jesus.
If this could have just been the first time that we see the human side of, once again, the ass kicker.
Right, as he's dealing with that, because that is like the moment he's most tormented, and he's facing his father. He's looking at him in the eye, and he's like, I need your help. I'm battling with this. And, you might be thinking, oh, he's battling with his fight against the dark side. Well, he's actually battling, his fight against the light side. You see him, he takes the mask off, you can see the torment, and instead it's sort of, like you said, it's sort of,
it's watered down.
Yes, right, exactly. It's a watered down version of what it could have been.
Let me ask you one thing about, and I'll let you both of you answer this, because I wanted to ask this too about Kylo. Are you upset at how, I guess, I wouldn't say easily, but I guess how easily he lost to a combination of Finn and Rey at the end, a person who is as badass and strong with the Force, clearly he could stop a blaster in mid-flight, and then goes and fights two people that have probably held a lightsaber for the first time in their lives, and was able to, I know Finn gave it his all but got his ass kicked, but then Rey goes in and just beats the shit.
No.
It wasn't even close, it seemed like.
Go ahead, Haddix. I'll jump in after.
I mean, not to take any points that you were going to say, Kiser, but you and I actually kind of talked about this after we saw the movie the second time.
Right.
I think there's, without spending a shit ton of time on it, I think there's multiple things that go into it. One, they built up how strong Chewie's crossbow thing was the whole movie.
I counted, there's at least 4 different instances where they show how strong that is. Yeah. He fires his crossbow. It blows up. I mean, it's a huge explosion when it hits. It knocks people halfway across the room. It causes, they even make comments about it. They stress that Chewie's crossbow blaster is like supreme power behind it.
Yeah.
So when he shoots, which is like, that's the emotional scene right there. Han gets stabbed. He, falls off the side of the catwalk, which, by the way, OSHA still does not exist in the Star Wars universe. I was so proud. I'm watching that movie for the first time. They're on the Starkiller base, and they're walking around planting those bombs in that area. And there's guardrails, and I'm like, oh my god, they put guardrails in. Finally, OSHA put their foot down. The First Order actually has things in order, so I was impressed. Until you get to the catwalk, and then the design of those rails, they just fold, they just go straight down, and then they open up, and the main part, this catwalk that walks across this giant emptiness void, where you think the guardrails would be most important, they just remove them. There's just no guardrails along that catwalk. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. So then Han gets stabbed and falls down there. So it's convenient that he doesn't have to flip over a guardrail. But still, shame on them. But Chewie then goes into that rampage, fires this blaster right at Kylo Ren. And a blaster that was causing explosions, was knocking stormtroopers across, 20 feet in the air, whatever. He just takes it. Yeah. And they show he hits himself a couple of times. They show the blood on the ground. You could tell he's in very physical pain.
Yeah, he's hurt.
So he's battling severely wounded at this point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think part of it, too, is, again, he's still fighting this whole light side, dark side, and he just killed his dad. So I think that's eating at him slightly as well, mentally, if you will.
Right.
But I think that's also what he needed to do to almost
he's
solidify himself into the dark side.
Sure.
But, I think there's the whole...
Finn is a trained warrior, too. When Finn battles him, Finn can sword fight. He battled that stormtrooper with the saber. So there was... He definitely, it's not just like me picking up a lightsaber and going out there and I have no formal training. Finn is very formal training. The fight with Rey and him, at first, Rey is pretty much running scared and sort of just kind of defending herself with the saber more than anything. She's kind of just sitting there. And the only time she really fights back and then basically whoops his ass is when he makes the comment about her having the Force and he wants to train her. And then it awoken something inside of her. When
the Force, if you will, was awoken.
If you will.
For what it's worth.
And that's when she goes nuts. It's almost like he flipped this switch, like she was trained back in the day, and it was like some Jason Bourne shit that came out.
Well, he makes that comment earlier in the movie that the longer or the more time passes, the stronger the Force she becomes once she realized her powers. So.
Right. And you could tell a couple different times she got in a fight early on with people. She's got that
bow.
That bow thing. Yeah. So you can tell she's got a little bit of, just normal skill in general, untrained, but she does have some skill. So no, it doesn't bother me that because he's obviously not completely trained himself. And they're not completely untrained either. So and he was severely wounded. I think it was fine, where I know some people may find it harder to believe. But it's not a case of Darth Vader losing the fight to, some jabroni. This is an untrained guy against two untrained but not unskilled people. And I think it was fine.
Agreed.
So we got a few minutes here before we wrap up, and we didn't get too much into theories here, but there's probably a couple quick theories we can throw out there. Hougie, I'll start with you. Is there a particular person or theory or anything you want to put out there that you feel could be the case or an idea going forward? Anything to that degree that you want to talk about?
I think the only thing that I thought when we left, when we saw the movie the first time, was more. There was two theories. One I'll short and one the long one. With Kylo, when they showed almost like the flashback of him, I guess, murdering off whoever he killed the rest of the Jedi Order. It didn't look like, where was he? Like, I don't know. I looked at that like
some rainy planet or something.
Yeah, like when he did, it just didn't seem like. It didn't seem like he did that alone or like
no,
it wasn't.
You assume that's the Knights of Ren.
Yeah. So it didn't seem like he was definitely assisted in doing that. So I was kind of curious. I hope they kind of go into more detail about that particular altercation when that kind of happened. And then the other one was with Snoke. Is he maybe even a previous Sith? There's a lot of people that say he has, the look of a Plagueis, and they did talk about how Plagueis was, trying to dabble with the notion of being able to resurrect himself or being able to create life via the Force, which also says that might have been one of the reasons why Anakin Skywalker was even quote unquote conceived, was because that was like the counteract of Plagueis trying to mess with the Force, and so the Force reacted by creating Anakin Skywalker to kind of, once again, yin and yang. So there's more to Snoke than meets the eye. I would probably assume that he is a previous Sith, but once again, it's Disney. Whatever's happened before the movies or whatever, they can do whatever they want with that, right, as far as they're concerned.
Haddix, how about you?
I was reading about some things today. I think Plagueis was the biggest one that everyone kind of thought right away. The only cons to that are
cons in Star Trek, dude.
Oh shit, my bad. The only wrath of cons are the fact that Disney omitted the Plagueis storyline from the canon, although he is still mentioned in Star Wars, the prequels.
Yeah.
So I mean, because of that, they can't bring him in. But the one that I actually thought was cool, and I was going to bring it up earlier when you mentioned about the whole Empire thing. Apparently, in Rebels, the cartoon that is part of the canon.
Correct. Yep.
There is a commander of there's a high-ranked commander on one of the starships who looks kind of like a younger, less deformed Snoke. And he was very, very high up. And some people are speculating that might be him because he had some sway with all of the Empire at that time. So once, Vader and Sidious died, he might have kind of gathered everybody. And since he was high up there, people could have followed him. And it would explain why they haven't called him like Darth Snoke, because he's technically not a Sith, like Hougie was saying.
Right.
So I mean, again, these are all speculations. But actually, the one I think I kind of liked after reading it was somebody made a good point that Snoke is a brand new character. It is, all these ties into, and not that he wasn't around or didn't know anything that happened in any of the previous movies, but because obviously he's a really old guy. But maybe he's just kind of a newer,
just a new villain. Yeah, sure.
And it's like Disney's way of kind of
getting introduced to it.
Getting their own, instead of everything have to do with like the old shit. You
right.
know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Which is another interesting.
Sure. I just want to touch base on my thoughts on the whole dream sequence that Kyle was referring to. When Rey touches Luke's original saber, which was Anakin's saber, she goes into this, she sees these like visions or something. And I watched this scene online after I saw it the first 2 times in theater, and I watched it like 5 or 6 times because something caught my eye, or my ear, I should say, the first time, and I had to go back. So the first thing I noticed is it may not be her visions. It may not be just her. It might be all Luke's visions that she's seeing there. And at one point, one of the sound bites you hear is Luke yelling no, and it's the same clip from Empire Strikes Back when Luke gets his hand cut off. And then on top of that, there's at the very end when you see Rey as a kid getting kind of pulled back as she watches the ship leave, or whoever, it's her family or whatever it is. and you hear the name. It says Rey, and then it's followed by, "These are your first steps." And when he says Rey, I go, "That's Obi-Wan," like the original Alec Guinness Obi-Wan saying Rey. I'm like, that's his voice. So I Googled it, and sure enough, they pulled like the word afraid when Alec Guinness says afraid and takes that Rey part and uses it in there. And then "These are your first steps" is a recording from Ewan McGregor. They got in to do that. So there's for Obi-Wan to have a line during that scene, it makes it interesting because all signs right now are pointing like, oh, she must be Luke's daughter. Rey must be Luke's daughter. Then there's some thoughts that she could be Han and Leia's kid. The fact is, Han and Leia know who she is. You can gather that based on the movie. They know something more about her than they're letting on. I read at one point early on, like somebody said, what if it's Obi-Wan's granddaughter? And now I'm starting, granddaughter or daughter, I'm starting to believe that maybe she is tied to the Kenobis in one way or another.
Well, I mean, she's wily.
And she was sneaking around that fucking
She was
Star
sneaking
Killer.
around the Star Killer, too. Much like her probably grandfather, I'm going to
Her
guess.
grandpapa. I mean,
Yeah.
I wonder who the... I can see that, though. And it would definitely be a twist, that's for sure.
Yeah. So it's just something I had a thought on, that there's something else there, and the fact that Obi-Wan spoke during that scene is interesting. So I don't know. I mean, and we've already talked over an hour on all this, and we probably could talk even more on some things that we didn't even get into too much. A potential love story between Finn and Rey.
I hope not.
So
It's too forced. I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
already enough force in the movie.
That's true. For me, I want to point this out real quick. One more small thing. I don't know about, did you guys feel the music was as memorable in this movie as it was in all the past movies?
I only really listened to the music. I didn't pay attention to it during the movie. I don't think, even when I first saw the movies. I feel like the music, I think, gets more memorable as you watch them more. But I was so interested in actually watching the movie and make sure I didn't miss anything, like any kind of Easter eggs or any type of what could be the premonitions for 8 and 9. That no, the music wasn't memorable. If you're asking me, from a person who's only seen the movie once.
Haddix?
I would agree that it wasn't as memorable. Maybe again, it's because you're too caught up in the story to really take it in, like Hougie just said. But I agree, it wasn't.
I don't think it was utilized the same way it has in the past either. And maybe it's because just the way it was shot with, the action scenes and this and that, there wasn't enough time to develop the music
And that might have been more of a Lucas thing anyways.
That's possible. I mean, John Williams still did the music, but maybe, like you said, maybe it's Lucas's direction with it, how he wanted the music utilized that J.J. Abrams didn't. But it's just something I noticed when I walked out of it. I was like, this, in every other movie, there's at least one theme that sticks in my mind, and this one, the only themes I could think of are the fanfare and things like that are previously in all the other Star Wars movies,
But also, the prequels, like Duel of Fates, is a good one. When that first started playing, I mean, I think we all remember that.
Yeah,
when we first watched it.
And there's not that.
That was also a movie of we were just trying to find something to hold on to because that movie wasn't very good. So that was much easier to. I guess what I'm saying is it's a testament to how good Episode 7 was. If we're saying that how good I'm sure the score of the music of the movie really is, I'm sure it's good. That it's an afterthought because of how good the movie actually is. And
to your point, that I think its best original score is one of the Academy Awards it's nominated for.
Oh, nice.
So the original score, sound editing, sound mixing, film editing, and visual effects are what they are nominated for. So
which is pretty classic for Star Wars. They're hardly ever up for Best Picture or things like that.
Yep, absolutely.
Not to change the subject, but I meant to say this to bring up in the beginning of the movie, as I'm sure you two have heard as a lot of people, Star Wars Episode 8 has been pushed back to December 15th.
Yeah, that's just news that may just come out today or
Yeah, I think it was today, yeah.
Yeah, so
almost 6 months later than it was supposed to.
They want it for the holiday release again. Yeah. I think that's what they're keeping it at. So,
and I think they're bumping up, while doing that, they're bumping up Pirates of the Caribbean, which is another Disney movie.
Right. Yeah, they're just shuffling things around, and I think they just
that's December 2018?
2017. December 15th, 2017.
Okay. So not doing 3 years.
Basically 2 years, yeah.
Right, and that's what they said. It would be about every 2 years for the main storylines, and then you'll get some other ones here and there.
Yeah.
So all in all, Disney buying the Star Wars franchise from Lucas, I think it'll be a good thing. We'll get plenty more Star Wars movies. We won't have to wonder what if they ever made them. Now we're actually getting them, which is cool stuff. And yeah, I don't know if you guys anything else you want to add before we call the show.
As long as Disney is in charge, we are not going to not hear about Star Wars for the next 6 years. It's just they are as Lucas was all about like the merchandising, they are all about promoting. Like they are crazy good at it. So
yeah, I mean we're gonna get Star Wars lands at parks. We're gonna see it all over the place, and it's gonna make Disney a lot of money, and it's going to keep us satisfied with all kinds of Star Wars fun.
I'll be honest. I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for you to close this. I want to hear it.
I was waiting to see if Haddix was going to say anything else before.
I got nothing.
All right. Well, for the home of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to the home of Super Bowl 50, I'm Josh Kiser. He's Josh Haddix and the birthday boy Kyle Hoagland, and we're out.
Oh, later.
Oh God, this is sad. Bye.